Hi and a good day. This is Lecture 5, The Origin of Mammals. Before we begin, let us correct the previous reference to the dinosaur extinction as occurring during the Cretaceous Tertiary. To be more accurate, it occurred during the Cretaceous period and Paleogene, an earlier division of the Tertiary period. So we will refer to it now as the Cretaceous Paleogene extinction. Although the earliest mammals were already present during the Mesozoic era, it was during the Cenozoic era when mammals flourished. Thus, it is known as the era of mammals. The Cretaceous Paleogene extinction event is the boundary between preceding Mesozoic era and the Cenozoic, which extends from 65 million years ago to the present day. The Paleocene is a transitional point between the devastation that is the Cretaceous Paleogene extinction event and the rich jungle environment that is the early Eocene. In the mid-Eocene, environmental conditions and perhaps absence of the dinosaurs allowed mammals to grow to mammoth proportions. Earliest hominids appeared during the Pliocene and earliest humans appeared during the Holocene. The Anthropocene is said to follow the Holocene. From the diagram of mammalian evolution, it is shown that mammals evolved from synapsid reptiles, in particular order Pelicosauria and order Therapsida. Subclass Synapsida of class Reptilia is so named due to the skull type. It consists of the basal order Pelicosauria and the more derived order Therapsida. Shown here is an anapsid skull without a temporal fenestra. For this, a diapsid, there are two pairs of temporal fenestra. And in the synapsid skull, there is a single pair of temporal fenestra below the post-orbital bone. The synapsid skull allowed the jaw muscles to bulge. There were more surface area for muscle attachment, and the skull became lighter. Order Pelicosauria gave rise to the more derived therapsids. It is said to be the first group to depart radically from the basic reptilian design from 300 million years ago. They are called bowl lizards due to their increased agility. Dimetrodon is known for its elongated neural spines, presumably to support a sail involved in thermoregulation. Scientists agree that such an increase in surface area would have made a very significant difference to the rate of heat exchange with the environment. Possible functional advantages are to achieve more quickly a preferred body temperature in the morning, to lose heat during the day, or to maintain a more or less stable temperature throughout. Dimetrodon is abundantly preserved in the early Permian of North America. The Paleozoic era lasted from 544 to 245 million years ago, and this 300 million years realized many critical events in evolution, including the formation of the supercontinent of Pangaea. The Permian period extends from about 286 to 245 million years ago and is the last geological period of the Paleozoic era. The reptiles during this time were mainly synapsids, in particular Pelycosaurs and Therapsids, that appeared in the Upper Carboniferous. Examples of therapsids from suborder Theriodonta and infraorder Cynodontia are Thrinaxodon, Cynognathus, and Probinognathus. You will see this in the next few slides. The replacement of the basal synapsid pelycosaurs by the more mammal-like therapsids in the Permian was an important event in the history of tetrapods because it initiated the eventual transition to the mammals. On how this happened, this is the hypothesis of Kemp from his 2006 paper. Medium to large-bodied terrestrial tetrapods adapted for hot, humid, ever-wet biome of Pangaea had low activity levels, were ectothermic, and had poor water conservation abilities. This prevented them from expanding their habitat into the adjacent, seasonally dry, savanna-like, tropical summer wet biome. During the course of the early Permian, a unique combination of environmental and biological circumstances resulted in the evolution of ancestral therapsid from a lineage of pelycosaurs. The first was the ecological opportunity offered by the adjacent tropical summer wet biome to any organism capable of existing free of standing bodies of fresh water, of tolerating high ambient temperature fluctuation, and therefore of surviving during the dry season. The second was the high atmospheric oxygen level, which facilitated adequate gas exchange for the start of the evolution of the higher aerobic metabolic rate necessary for enhanced homeostatic regulation. The third was the nature of the carnivorous ancestors, which endowed it with the potential to acquire characters needed for a higher energy mode of life. The outcome was the evolution of a lineage of medium-sized carnivores in the summer wet biome. At this time, the changing Permian climate resulted in a contact between summer wet biome and temperate biomes. Once in the new temperate environment, therapsids radiated rapidly. Pelycosaur species closer to limits of environmental range became more prone to extinction. So you see here the therapsids, Thrinaxodon, Cynognathus, and Probinognathus as giving rise to Mammaliaformes, or the mammal-like reptiles, and eventually to the mammals. So what were the characteristics of the therapsid reptiles? One is that the pineal opening was reduced in size. The secondary palate was developed. Double occipital condyles were present. Dentary bone of the lower jaw was greatly enlarged. Legs were brought up underneath the body. And temporal opening was greatly expanded. These characteristics, if you remember, are leaning more towards mammal characteristics. So how do you distinguish between reptiles, mammal-like reptiles, and true mammals? So for one, the jaw articulation. For reptiles, the jaw articulation is between the quadrate on the skull and articular on the lower jaw. For mammals, it's between the squamosal on the skull and dentary on the lower jaw. If you take a look at the picture, you will see that in the pelycosaur, it is a reptile, and the articulation is between the quadrate on the skull and articular on the lower jaw. For the therapsid, there are two articulations. One is between the quadrate on the skull and articular on the lower jaw, and another is on the squamosal of the skull and dentary on the lower jaw. And for the true mammal, the articulation is only found between the squamosal and the dentary. Number 2 is on the middle ear bones. In mammals, there are 3 middle ear bones: the incus, the malleus, and the stapes. The mammalian stapes comes from the reptilian stapes or columella, and it's the only middle ear bone in reptiles. So in mammals, the articular becomes the malleus, the quadrate the incus, and the stapes remains. You see here the therapsid Thrinaxodon with a quadrate articular jaw joint. Probinognathus is more derived because it has two jaw joints, articular quadrate and dentary squamosal. For Morganucodon, it is a mammal-like reptile. It has two jaw joints, but the quadrate and articular are much reduced. Finally, the opossum is a true mammal and only has one jaw joint between the dentary and squamosal. Here is a depiction of Morganucodon, an early mammaliaform genus that lived from the late Triassic to the Middle Jurassic. It first appeared about 205 million years ago. Unlike many other early mammaliaforms, Morganucodon is well represented by abundant and well-preserved fossils. Hadrocodium is the smallest known Mesozoic mammaliaform. It's approximately 2 grams. It was discovered in 2001 in China and dates back at about 195 million years old. So this is a depiction of Hadrocodium wui. For infraclass Eutheria, the oldest known eutherian is Juramaia sinensis, or Jurassic mother from China, which dates back at 160 million years ago. So why did the mammals survive and the synapsids die? Evolving characteristics that contributed to more efficient food gathering and processing, such as enlarged dentary, changes in jaw articulation and musculature, heterodonty and increased sensory acuity, and more efficient respiration, as well as presence of fur, contributed to endothermy. Endothermy allowed the early mammals to be active at night and to hide from the dinosaurs. Their small size and increased sensory acuity further increased this ability. The early mammals were presumed to be small or mouse-sized, insectivorous, nocturnal, relied on well-developed senses of smell and hearing, homeothermic and had fur as insulation, probably laid eggs, and probably had mammary glands. What were the advantages of staying small? It reduced competition. These early mammals still lacked sophisticated evaporative cooling mechanism, and so staying small was an advantage. More important features were still evolving, such as maternal care, as well as their soft anatomy and physiology. And this is demonstrated by similarities between therians and non-therians. As mentioned earlier, in the mid-Eocene, mammals started to grow to mammoth proportions and actually resulted to what would be called the megafauna. Unfortunately, the late quaternary megafauna extinctions are being attributed to humans, such as this publication by Johnson in 2002. What are your thoughts on this? Now you more or less have an idea on the origin of mammals. Due to the countless fossil evidences that continue to be discovered, there is still a growing number of theories as to the origin of mammals. Thank you for listening. You may now proceed with your learning activity. Have a good day and please keep safe.